So every object tells a story, much like this box. But this box holds several stories. And in it is contents that connect all the stories together. For me to show you what's in the box, to reveal the contents, would be a confession. That's over 30 years old. When I was a child, I used this box to hide personal things and keep them away from prying eyes. And when I went away to college, I left it at home and began to forget about it and buried the contents deep in the recesses of my mind. The contents connect myself, my father, a little girl named Annabelle Lee, and a young man named Alan Landry. And in order for me to show you the contents and for you to recognize the importance, you would have to know about each of these people. And I should probably start with my father. When I was a young boy, we had a very good relationship. We were like buddies. We'd play catch in the backyard. We'd go fishing. We'd have late night conversations about anything and everything. And if we disagreed, I think he enjoyed that part more than anything else. But when I went away to college, he became distant from me. When I called, he wouldn't come to the phone. When I came home, he would make himself scarce. I used to go out with him on his jobs. He was a plumber. And I would ride along with him and help him figure out what the next job was going to be. And he would test me. What tool am I going to need? Where is the next job located? He was always teaching me something. He taught me plumbing. But I guess it was probably my sophomore year in college. The few times I did call home, he wouldn't answer. My mother would say he was busy, too busy to talk, or maybe he came home late and was sleeping. Eventually, I stopped calling, didn't see a purpose. And then, about a week before I was supposed to graduate, I woke from a dream. Had a dream that I was in my father's red Ford truck, and we were riding along with the sunlight streaming in the windshield, going to the next job. And my father turned to me and smiled and said, "Are we going the right way?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "It's going to be a good day, isn't it?" And I said, "Yes." And when I woke from that dream, I just had this feeling of contentment and satisfaction that I rushed to call home. My mother answered. I asked to speak to my father. He was gone. I reminded her that I was going to graduate in a few weeks and that I would love to have them come. And I would really want to talk to my father if she would have him call me. And she promised me that she would tell him. But the phone call never came. And I walked across that stage alone. And after that, I never went home. And that was over 30 years ago. I didn't even go home for my mother's funeral. The only reason I did come home was after my father died. It was my job to put his home in order. Some neighbors came out and said, "Wouldn't you want to hold on to the house? Why sell it? Wouldn't you want it as a home?" And I guess they just didn't understand that it was no longer a home, it was just a house. But then I went through my father's possessions and I found the box, and it was hidden away under blankets, buried in boxes up in the rafters of our attic. And it was startling to find it, not because he held on to it or that he hid it away, but because I knew what was inside the box, something that I thought I had forgotten. And I knew that because of the contents of the box, my father must have thought about me, and it changed everything for him. Because to know what he saw, I can only imagine the grief it caused him. And then I began to understand why he had moved away from me, had stopped calling. The only problem is he never knew the truth. He didn't know why it happened or how it happened. And now it's too late. But in order for you to understand the significance, I would also have to tell you the story about Annabelle Lee. But I would need more time to do that. Thank you.
Stephen Olson. Please welcome Stephen Olson.
Is that good? Okay. Some of you might have been here last month when I began the story about the contents of this box. And I told you how it related to the relationship of my father. But also mentioned that there were other people connected to the contents, and one of those people was Annabelle Lee. And Annabelle Lee was a little girl who lived across the street. She was a bright girl, bright in spirit and in her eyes. And she was inquisitive. She always had questions. Not just one question, but a whole barrage of questions. And there were times when I wish she hadn't asked so many questions, but her delight in my answers was the reward. One year came the year of her 8th year birthday, and by that time, my parents were playing canasta with her parents. And during one of those canasta nights, it was decided that I would attend Annabelle Lee's 8-year princess party. Now, I objected to that, but my mother insisted. She also insisted that I should use my grass cutting money to buy Anna a gift. And I was almost okay with that, except my mother insisted that she had to go with me to help me pick out the gift because I didn't have any experience in buying a present for a young woman. I tried to remind her that it wasn't my ideal to go to the party or to buy a gift, and an 8-year-old was a far distance from a young woman. But my words fell on deaf ears, and that's where I found myself standing in front of the jewelry counter at the local Woolworths. And my mother was transfixed on a heart-shaped locket that she exclaimed would be the perfect gift. I was leaning towards the comic books. And I explained to her that I thought that that would be a bad idea for me to buy that gift for Annabelle Lee, and that Archie comic would be a better gift, and my mother told me that I wasn't thinking like a little girl. And again, I reminded her that I was not a little girl, and that if I were to buy a comic, it would be a Marvel Spider-Man or Conan, and definitely not Archie. But again, my words fell on deaf ears, and I found myself leaving Woolworths, $10 poorer, with a little box wrapped up all in pretty paper and a little pink bow just to complete my humiliation. couple weeks after that, I was dragged across the street to go to a party that I was the only boy invited. So I was completely surrounded by a bunch of little pretty pink princesses. And I endured the high tea, the musical chairs, and the Shake It All About dance. Eventually came the time to cut the cake and to open the gifts, and then as the gifts were being opened and paper was being shredded and thrown around and gifts were being shown and there were stuffed animals and baby dolls and even an Archie comic book. And I went over to remind my mother about her choice about the Archie comic. When we heard this highest squeal I had ever heard, you would think a rabbit had been assaulted. And I turned just in time to see Annabelle Lee charging towards me, screaming and pleading for me to put the necklace around her neck. And she slammed into me, all hugs. And the only way I could get away from her hugs was to tell her to turn around so I could put the necklace on, and she did. And as soon as that clasp was clicked, she shot off and was completely surrounded by a bunch of princesses all oohing and ahhing. And I took that opportunity to escape and go across the street and spent the rest of the day watching Johnny Quest. Now, for most people, that would be the end of the story, but unfortunately it wasn't. Because you see, Annabelle Lee loved that necklace. I remember hearing her mother tell my mother at one of their canasta nights that it was the best gift she had ever gotten. She never took the necklace off. She even wore it when she slept. Even if she took a bath, she never took the necklace off. And so I reminded my mother the next day what a terrible choice she had made. And that one of these days, I'm just going to lose it. Because every time I would go outside, there would be Annabelle Lee. Even if I was able to sneak out the house the back door, I'd get this feeling that somebody was following me. I'd turn around, and there was Annabelle Lee. And I told my mother, it's just one of these days I'm going to have to yell at her, tell her to stop following me around like some lost puppy dog. And my mother just said that I was too much of a gentleman to break a little girl's heart. And eventually Annabelle would see that I was just too old for her, and then I would miss the attention. And I told her that kind of attention I didn't need, especially with the guys all singing the Cradle in the Treetop song. But now that I look back on it, I see that my mother was right, because there would come a time when Annabelle Lee was no longer there, and I did miss that attention. I missed those bright eyes and smile and all those questions. And I guess in order for you to completely understand how Annabelle Lee is connected to this content, it's like most stories. Most stories are intertwined with other stories. And so another person that is also intertwined with the contents of this box is Alan Landry. And I'll have to tell you about Alan Landry next time. This is actually the third part of our four-part story, which was started 4 months ago, but I missed 2 months. It has to do with the object in this box and the fact that every object holds a story, and the object in this box is connected to 3 people. And I've already spoken of my father, Annabelle Lee. And the next person is Alan Landry, and Alan Landry connects them all together. Alan Landry was a tragedy on a steamroller. He was the kind of person that us kids just tried to avoid. We found out later in life that he was actually the product of a passive mother and a non-caring, very strict, abusive father. And we never knew of how much abuse he had endured, because like I said, whenever Alan Landry came into the school, we just tried to avoid him and always counted our blessings when he was beating up on somebody else. I got very adept at avoiding him until one day I did cross his path, and that day has had repercussions that continue till today. Back in those days, they decided to build an overpass over the railroad tracks that went through our town, and they had to build up these huge mounds of dirt for the overpass to be able to pass over the tracks. And it became a very popular hangout for us kids to get up there and ride our bicycles down. I used to like to climb up there and just look down the tracks at some future horizon that I might end up going to someday. And on this particular day, I had just gotten up to the crest of the top of one of the hills when I saw Alan Landry, his back to me. He was sitting in the dirt. I did happen to notice that he was holding his father's .22. And if you didn't understand my description of Alan Landry, the last thing you would want to come across is Alan Landry with a loaded gun. I had contemplated the ideal of just sneaking back down and going back the way I came, but the ideal that my back would be towards Alan Landry with him with a loaded gun made me pause. I decided that I would approach him, at least to find out if he still had any ammunition in the gun. As I got closer to him, I noticed that he was shaking, almost sobbing. And when I came up to him, he turned around quickly. And it was the first time I had ever seen fear in Alan Landry's eyes. It was very disturbing. He didn't say anything. I sat down next to him and I noticed that there were several spent shells at his feet. And I asked him, I said, "Target shooting?" And he said, No, I was just practicing, that's all. I said, "Okay, you seem kind of shook up. What's wrong?" And he didn't speak right away. He just looked at me and he said, "I think I hit something." And I said, "Hit something? You mean like a bird?" And he says, "No, I don't think so. It couldn't have been a bird. Didn't you hear the squeal? It was a high-pitched squeal." And I said, "No, I think the train passing. I didn't even hear the gun go off. I'm sure it might have been a rabbit. You know, rabbits, when they die, they actually have a very high squeal." But he was still shaken up, didn't really accept that. The only thing that he was concerned about now was that it was getting late. And if he didn't get home before his father did and found out that he had his rifle, he would beat the hell out of him. And I said, "Well, we still have plenty of time to get home. We'll just take the shortcut through the field and we'll get there another time." He goes, No, we can't go that way. That's where I hit. Whatever it was, it's there. He said, I was looking in one direction. I was about ready to shoot, and I saw something that moved out of the corner of my eye, and when I turned, the gun went off. I said, "It's going to be okay. It's probably just a rabbit. Mr. White shoots rabbits in that field all the time." So I convinced him that we had to go the shortcut. I would go ahead of him, and I would look and see if there was anything there that he might have hit. And with some assurance, he did eventually stand up. I gathered up all of the gun shells, put them in my pocket, and we walked down to the field. And like I said, Alan Landry was behind me. And, you know, I was walking with some trepidation because I didn't really want to see the crumpled body of some rabbit, and I was also fearing the idea that maybe it was somebody's pet dog that had wandered into the field. And it was just something I really didn't want to see, but I wanted to put Alan Landry's mind at peace. And as I got closer to the spot where he said he thought he had shot something, I noticed something lying in the field. And I had to get closer, and as the closer I got to it, the more I think my mind was trying not to deal with what I was seeing. And the soybean fields were splattered with fresh blood. I turned to look at Alan, who had stopped behind me, and he asked me what it was. And I said, it's Annabelle Lee. And he cried out, "No, it can't be. You said it would be a rabbit. It can't be. Is she dead?" And I said, "Yes, Alan, she's dead." And he collapsed to his knees. And I said, "Alan, it's going to be okay. It was an accident. We'll just go home. We'll tell my parents. They'll know what to do." And I thought that would reassure him. But no, it upset him even more. He shot up. He stood up, waving his hand, says, no, we can't tell anybody about this. No one can know." And I said, "Annabelle Lee's parents are going to need to know what happened." And he said, "No, they'll call the police. They'll put me away. All the things they'll say have been leading up to this. They'll just talk about what I've done in the past, and my father won't care, and they'll just have me locked up. We can't tell anyone." And I tried to convince him that Annabelle Lee's family needed to know. And that's when I saw that look in his face, that "Alan Landry, you better get out of my way" look. And he said, "If you tell anybody about this, if you don't help me hide Annabelle Lee, I will tell everybody that you killed her." Now, having my experience with Alan, I knew that he would be committed to doing that. And the fear that he had, I almost think he didn't have any other choice. So I agreed to help Alan. And nothing that I can say is going to justify what we did. But we decided to put her body into the foundation where they were building the overpass. We didn't just throw her in, though. I climbed down, Alan lowered her down to me. I placed her in the bottom of the forms that they had built, covered her in rocks and stone, and then I reached up to Alan for help getting out. And I saw a moment in his eyes when he was contemplating leaving me there. But something clicked, and he did help me up. We walked home. We didn't speak to each other. When we got to my house, I took out the shells from my pocket, and I handed them to Alan, and Alan walked home. I didn't see very much of him after that, even at school. The kids had wondered what had happened to him because he wasn't bothering them anymore. And I think they continued to avoid him just in case, but they were happy that he was no longer causing any pain for them. I had heard that he ended up punching his music teacher in the face and was suspended from school. And his father had decided that was the last straw and was going to send him off to military school. A couple of days after I heard that, Alan came one night to my bedroom window and knocked on the window, and I opened it, and I was about ready to ask him how things were, and he said, I think you know how things are. I'm being sent away and we'll probably never see each other again. I said, well, no, we'll see each other after graduation. And he goes, no, I don't think so. And then he reached into his pocket and he took out a crumpled up brown paper bag and handed it to me. And he said, I held on to this. I'm not sure why. I just thought it might be important, but I can't hold on to it anymore. And I want you to have it. And I asked him what was in it. And he didn't reply. He just turned around and just gave me a back wave after I said, well, I'll see you after graduation. And he just walked into the darkness. A couple of days later, they found his body under the overpass. He shot himself with a .22. And everybody said that he just didn't have the nerve to go off to military school, but I knew it was the guilt. He had done something that he could not resolve. The only thing he didn't realize was how much he had affected everybody's life. Annabelle Lee's family, my family, myself. Even after his death, the repercussions of his connection to all of us still affects me. Now, the simplest thing would be for me to open the box and show you what's inside. But I think I still need to explain what all three connections are and why this box became so important. But I'll need 5 more minutes. Thank you.
Stephen Olson. Please welcome, y'all, Stephen Olson.
So, some of you have heard the 3 stories connected to the object in this box. About my father, about Annabelle Lee, and about Alan Landry. I have to tell you about the box. As a child, it was just a place that I would keep things that were personal. One night, Alan Landry gave me a crumpled up paper bag 2 days before he killed himself. I discovered what was in the bag and decided to hide it away because I feared it. Now, if you remember, I used to have a great relationship with my father until I went away to college. And I always thought at that time, the reason why he stopped talking to me, stopped seeing me when I came home, was because I chose not to be the son of father and son plumbing. And over time, I just became angry and gave up on having a relationship with him. When he died, I came home to take care of his house and all of his belongings. And that's when I found the box. And this box I had hidden away in my room, hoping to forget about it. And to some degree I did, until I found it in our attic, buried under blankets and boxes. And then I understood why my father acted the way he did. Because in the box, as I said, was the bag that Alan Landry gave me the night we buried Annabelle Lee. He gave the bag to me because he thought it was important, and he thought I would know what to do with it. And he was right in that it was important, but he was wrong about me. I did know what to do with it, but I was afraid, so I hid it away. It was the necklace that I gave Annabelle Lee on her 8th birthday. Now, if you haven't heard the story about Annabelle Lee, what you have to know is when I gave her this necklace on her 8th birthday, from the day I put it on her, she never took it off. She was never seen without it. So then you have to think about my father finding this necklace that belonged to a little girl who disappeared. Nobody knew what happened to her, but he did know that she was never seen without the necklace. And I had to think about that and think about what my father must have thought when he saw the necklace. That his son, the son he thought he knew, must have done something horrible to Annabelle Lee and kept the necklace as a souvenir. And the whole issue is, if I had taken responsibility, if I had been brave enough to tell my father, my parents, my mother what had happened after Alan Landry shot himself, my father would have probably understood me better and not think of me as this horrible person, the only thought he could think of after finding the necklace. But I am also have to think that he didn't give the necklace to the police. He didn't destroy the necklace. And I think because, like myself, Alan Landry, my father, couldn't destroy the necklace because it would be like destroying the soul of Annabelle Lee. So we all three hid it away. We all three didn't take the responsibility of what needed to be done. Had I confessed, Annabelle Lee's parents could have died peacefully. I don't think it would have changed anything for Alan Landry. The guilt was too much for him. That's why he killed himself. But it would have repaired the relationship I had with my father. And all of that would have been different. Now they say confession is good for the soul. But if everyone who can forgive you is gone, then all you're left with is loneliness and regret. Thank you.
Bravo!
And that's Stephen Olson. Now we know.